All right. Steve, thank you for inviting us over here or welcoming us because we
Uh,
invited ourselves actually,
well,
and
it's a long drive for you guys,
we're
but
in the shed of secrets. Thank you.
I'm not sure what this is about, but I'm here.
Well,
So
we're going to go in a bunch of different directions if you don't mind. But initially, I've got to say congratulations to you and your son, Dustin, just having won the Holly. And I
yeah,
know that's a real big deal because you have some pretty big shoes to fill, and he's filling them.
in a big way,
Yeah.
and I'm pulling for him. Somebody asked me, so he's won 2 Gold Cups, and I won 3 in the course of my career, and I think it was Carlos Duncan said, he's going to wind up winning more Gold Cups than you do. I said, I hope he wins 10 times more than I did.
Yeah.
He's a great fisherman. He's a great human being. And I wish him well. I'm not in a contest with anybody.
No, I get that.
I'm in a contest with the fish.
Yeah. What did that mean when you guys had? I mean, I think there are only two other or one other father and son's name on the Gold Cup trophy. The Brewers, Craig and his
Craig and
father.
his son Jim, his father Jim.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that must have really been heartfelt
Oh, it
when
was heartfelt.
when
Yeah, it was very.
Dustin's name
No,
is up there with yours.
it's just great. Yeah. No, actually, I believe that the Gold Cup today is a much more difficult to win tournament than it was in my day because we use gaffs. We drug these things over the side and brought them in. If we didn't fight them down and grab a leader and pull them over with a hand gaff, and that's a whole different deal.
Angling wise.
Angling wise for the angler, and we used to just a release constituted grabbing the leader and popping the fish off. The guide would grab the leader and pop the fish, and now they got to actually
Take the fly out.
take the fly out of a release. So for to win that thing today, for an angler, as you know, it's pretty easy to grab a leader on one of these things and say, we got him. But you know what? To get your hands on the fish and take the fly out of the fish, and that's a whole different gig.
That's a caught fish.
That's truly a caught fish. And all fishing guides, when a fish is right in front of the boat, they'll tell their angler, I could have gaffed him, that's a caught fish.
You got the
You know,
leader. You got the leader. That's a caught
you got
fish.
the leader, that's a caught fish. And for the angler, he goes, he feels good about himself. So we all say that. All fishing guides say that. But the real truth is, there's a whole big difference between when you've only got a shock leader that's 12 inches and somebody's got to get their hand on that thing and grab this fish by the gill and hang on and flop around. So it's a whole different deal.
Yeah.
So, in my day, I did win that thing 3 times, but I think it's much more difficult to win today than it was then. So
How important was it for you in your prime to win these tournaments?
uh,
I mean, you won the fall fly 7 times with 5 different anglers. I mean, that's a hell of a statement for you about you as a guide.
yeah, well, it just had, I think, in that bonefish tournament, I remember the first bonefish tournament, fly tournament that I fished. Went up and fished a couple of practice days, and it was actually Billy Knowles. I was talking to Billy Knowles, and he said, holy crap, have you ever seen so many bonefish out there? And I'm thinking, I'm not seeing, I'm not, where
Not seeing that many.
where are these guys fishing, Because I was getting like 20 shots a day, which I think is a good day of bonefishing in the Keys, even then, and eking out like 2 or 3 fish, and these guys are saying, I've never seen so many bonefish. So then the tournament starts, and I go out there and I get my 20 shots, and we catch a weight fish and a couple of releases, and we're in second place. Another day goes by, and we get our 20 shots, and we catch a weight fish and 3 releases, and we're in first place. And I'm thinking, maybe their idea of a lot of fish and my idea, a lot of fish are 2 different things. But anyhow, so I did well in those tournaments. I didn't go. My forte in that tournament was not to see a lot of fish, but to see fish that were catchable.
Right.
Because there are a lot of fish in the downtown area. They call it downtown Islamorada. Those fish are very difficult. They get fished for 2 or 3 times a day. They get hip. They're smart. And so I go wander off way out in the back country. I get like 2 or 3 shots, but I knew that if the fly got right, we could catch the things, and that's what I did.
Even back then, the the bonefish downtown were tough.
Tough,
Really?
legendary, which I think is so cool. The harder the fish are to catch, I think the more fun it is, because they are smart. And it takes so much,
Right.
it ups the skill level to know what's going on out there and when to move the fly, when to stop the fly, recognizing when the fish is taking the fly, all that stuff. So, but when you catch those big ones that are really challenging, that's the best.
In 1996, I don't want to make it about a me story, but this was the greatest bone fishing day of my life. It was the opening day of the fall fly. I was with Harry Spear, one of your contemporaries, and we were on Shell Key. And you have lines in at 7. We'd been watching these fish tail. And right at 7, I make my cast, and I hook this fish, a 10, 12-pound fish. We're pulling off the flat, and Harry says, well, if this is a perfect world and a perfect day, we'd catch a 12-pounder before we get off this flat. And right then, we saw these fish tailing over in the edge, and we went over there. Boom, I catch a 13-pound, 12-ounce bonefish. We were at the weigh station by 7:30 with these 2 monsters. Then we went out and caught 6 releases. And that is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That is the bonefish capital of the world. These big monsters in shallow water that are really hard to catch. And I was just like on cloud 9. I'd never seen anything like that.
No, it's I've had those kind of days, and it's just that was such a special fishery. We would catch some days 5 bonefish. The smallest be 9 pounds.
Crazy.
Wow.
Like 2 11s, 12 and a half. 10 and a 9 or something. You just crazy stuff.
Where do bonefish rank in the order, the fishing order, if you will? And obviously, I think that we gravitate from one fish to another over time, because you got the big 3: bonefish, tarpon, permit, and then you get the snook. So it's the big 4. In the big world, where do bonefish
I think
stack up?
bonefish are the best. I think they're number one. I love bonefish because they're honest. If you make a really good cast and move it at the right time and recognize what's going on out there and watch the body language of the fish and actually hook up, that's the biggest reward of all, I think, because it's just takes so much, I think, fishing savvy, big bonefish. That's not to say you can't catch an 11-pound bonefish in Andros that's never seen a fly before, so that's a whole different thing. But at the time in Isla Morada, it was such a demanding fishery, skill level-wise. And if anybody wants a challenge, that was the best challenge. Now, permit, they're not an honest fish.
In what way?
They suck. I mean, you make a great cast. The fish races over the fly. You drag the fly. You tweak it. You do all this crap, and they look at the fly and all that. So, I mean, that just is pretty annoying, I didn't have a gray hair in my head before I started permit fishing.
And what about tarpon?
Oh, tarpon are just so spectacular, I mean, again, it's the fishing on the Keys has gotten to be very challenging because the fish are difficult and they see a lot of boats every day and a lot of flies every day. But and that wasn't the case back in the day. But when you hook one of these things, it looks like a plane crash out there, just bombs going off. All of them. What they do to their body in the air, unless you see it in slow motion, you've really never seen a tarpon jump. I've seen some slow motion videos of these tarpon jumping. The scales on their body are pulsating when they're in the air. It's just really spectacular. So for balls ass excitement, that's probably the top of the line,
And a tarpon eating a fly is a pretty special thing too.
The bite is everything. When you see them come over, and there's so many different kinds of bites, the little sippy bites and head out of the water this far, gargling a boom, So yeah, it's everything about it. I think for me, the bite is the best of all,
Well,
the whole fight.
Nikki really hasn't experienced a lot of the permit fishing. We've done some bone fishing elsewhere. And so as much as anything, it might be my fault because I've always gravitated to the big tarpon, even though I fish, the permit and the bonefish tournaments. And Nikki, I think you too were enamored and taken back by what these fish do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we did one trip to Venezuela bone fishing, which was awesome, those pancake flats. But other than that, it's been tarpon my whole life, just because of you. and I don't.
It's your fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't regret it at all. I love them.
You ought to go. I don't know if there's enough bonefish around Islamorada today. So those
The big ones.
big ones to really try to make a day out of it. But
Right.
literally, we were seeing these giant things that look like footballs out there. They're so big around, you know.
But you've had a relationship with 3 different anglers. I think really a big time relationship with tournaments, world record chasing, and one of the freshwater magazines mentioned that you and Dell were one of the top 50 most inspirational fishermen because of your relationship with the permit, and Dell catching over 500. I think you and Dustin caught most of those fish, with Dell.
Right.
Tell me about those early years of permit fishing west of Key West with you and Dell.
Actually, I learned about permit fishing on Dell Brown's money. Yeah. So he called me like in 1980. He wanted to target permit and fish for permit a lot. And I had done a lot of permit fishing, but a lot of it, I've had maybe 15 or 20 fish ever caught with me on a fly. And so it was a learning experience. And we were using lots of different kinds of flies, but and Dell was quite an innovator fly-wise, and he was using other people's ideas as well. It wasn't Dell exclusively. There were a lot of guys that were trying to catch these things more frequently, but for whatever reason, we started catching a lot of permit, and more permit than anyone had ever dreamed of catching. I mean, there was like, if you caught a permit in your life, it was like a big deal. And
Right.
we were catching, we had countless days. We caught 5, 6. Sandy caught 7 with me one day, which was the best day of permit fishing I've ever had. But also learning where the fish were, when they were getting in a feeding mode. Sometimes they're taking crabs off the surface. Very cool to catch them on a surface fly, like a dry fly, basically. And you can see them coming down, taking crabs off the surface. That's pretty cool. That's a caught fish. You get a fly in front of that thing. The right kind of fly, something that floats, and quiver it, not really strip it or drag it, just kind of shake it.
Shake it.
Yeah, shake it and look like it. Because these crabs are coming down as
Wiggling.
yeah, just like on this right there, they're dead meat, Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool to see a permit. The coolest permit strike I ever saw, I was with Charlie Causey, and we were going down the edge of this channel, and the tide had fallen out. We had on one of these floating flies looking for one of these cruising permit taking crabs, and we weren't seeing any. And a permit tailed, and there's a little alcove in the flat. It was only about, a foot deep, and this permit tail. We had the wrong kind of fly because this fish is feeding on the bottom, And he threw that floating fly over there, and it drifted over the fish, and the fish had his head down. He kind of lifted up, and he saw the fly, and he was trying to get his head up to the surface, but his tail was hitting the bottom. He couldn't get the fly, and he swam off into the channel, and I said, and Charlie said, "God damn, I thought he was going to bite that thing." And I said, "Watch this." And the fish went out in the channel, got up ahead of steam, and lunged up onto the flat and took the fly off the surface. His whole head completely out of the water. Yeah, so
Oh my God.
it was like a 25-pound fish. So it was like, makes your hair stand on end to see something like that. It's very cool.
Mentioning Charlie Causey, I remember, and I think you remember because you've got such a great memory. But when I was fishing the Dale Brown tournament with Dustin, the first practice day on a Monday, we had 2 practice days, and the tournament started Wednesday. So Monday we didn't see anything. It was 63 degrees.
I remember
blowing
that.
Like,
I remember that.
Blowing like
he
snot.
He calls me every night in a tournament. Yeah.
It was so bad. So the next day at breakfast, I said, Dustin, you want to go mess around or you want to go have some fun? He said, what are you talking about? I said, look, there are no permit out there. The tournament starts on Wednesday. Let's go play golf. And he thought about the guilt about not being out there looking, but we knew there was nothing to look for, really, essentially.
Sure.
So we're headed back to Sombrero to play golf. We had breakfast at Stouts, where you used to always hang out for breakfast. And we cross each other. You're going to Key West to fish with Causey. And we know what kind of a horrible day it was going to be.
Right.
And we all stop, we pull over, and you asked us, what are we all doing? And we said, we're going to go play golf. And we said, obviously, it's going to be horrible and ugly down there. And I remember you saying, God, I wish I knew how to play golf. Because we knew what kind of a day that was going to be.
I've spent many a day stepping on my dick down there.
Was there a point in time with the permit fishing in Dell where you got over the hump? Was it a fly design? Was it just you understanding the dynamics of permit?
So I could go through an entire talk about the evolution of permit flies, but nobody was putting weight in a fly back then for permit, you know. And Nat Ragland came up with a little fly that had glass eyes on it, which essentially was weight.
That was the Mo,
Huh?
right? That was the Mo fly?
No, it wasn't that. It had glass eyes on a piece of wire. I think there's some over there in that fly tying bench, but it provided weight. And Nat had a guy by the name of Bill Levy, catch a couple permit on a fly on this thing. So we said, holy shit, we got to put eyes on our fly. So the epoxy fly, I'll tell you where the epoxy fly came from. I was looking for eyes because I was all of a sudden knew that eyes were the deal, right? So my wife had some shelf paper in the drawers in our kitchen, and it had little daisies on it, you know. But the center of the daisy was basically an eye, right? So I cut the centers out, and it's got sticky paper. I tried to stick them on, they wouldn't stick on, you know. So I made a chenille body, you know. And I took some epoxy glue, and I was trying to stick these things on, and it made a mess. So I said, screw it, I'll just cover the whole head of the thing with epoxy. That's where the epoxy fly came from.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Yeah, and actually, Harry Spear came over a couple of days later, and I think we caught a permit on it because it was more weight. It added more weight. The epoxy, screw the eyes didn't mean a damn thing. It was just the weight. It was all about weight. So then we started putting on, after that, the epoxy fly had its day, and then we started putting on little barbell eyes and getting the fly down. And I think the real thing is weight, the right amount of weight, because sometimes they're real shallow and sometimes they're deeper, and sometimes they're down there 4 feet of water along the edge of a channel and you can see them mudding. You got to have something that really gets down there because they're not going to see anything up there, you know. But that's how the evolution of that's how the epoxy fly ever got started. So.
What about the merkin? I mean, what a name. Who named that thing?
I named that thing.
How'd you come up with that?
I was fishing a guy at the time years ago who was kind of a rude character. He told me what a merkin was. Maybe a lot of people don't know what a merkin is.
Why don't you explain what a merkin is?
Well, in the Middle Ages, the prostitutes in Europe, a lot of them had lice. So they would shave their vaginal area and wore a toupee. And the toupee, a false hairpiece, was called a merkin. So, and also got rid of the lice, I suppose. So anyhow, so this guy told me what it was, and I had tied a fly. I was using a fly like that. And it's kind of that same shape, you know.
Right. I've never seen one, so I don't know.
At any rate, he said, he started saying, I'm jerking my merkin when he was stripping the flies. So Dell was trying to figure out a name for the fly, and I said, merkin's a great idea. It's a false hairpiece, you know, and it fits right in. So, and his wife actually found out the true meaning of a merkin and told him he had to change the name. She didn't want him associated with something like that. So that's where the word merkin came from. But now it's known more for a fly than what it ever was originally. You know?
And there's a term called the
merkin.
It's
called the merkin. Is the name of a fly down there. It's pretty how the evolution is. Well, you live long enough, lots of crazy shit happens, you know.
What your relationship with Dell was really groundbreaking for sure. What about the relationships that you had, or not only with Sandy, but with Tom Evans, you know, chasing those records?
So Tom Evans started fishing with me, I think, in like 71. And we caught a few tarpon, and I started guiding in 68, so I had a lot to learn as far as tarpon goes. So, but I think he enjoyed fishing with me because I was running around trying to learn and also put in a magnum effort in a long day, and we worked like hell to catch fish. So we hit it off pretty well. And you've met Tom, so Tom is a pretty strong character in his own right. So he would book me. So back in, I think like 73 or 4, he started booking me 45 days straight. We fish from May 1st to June 15th every year. So
From dark to dark.
Dark to dark, yeah, 45 days straight. So we started learning a lot, started catching a lot, figuring out flies, and yeah, I mean, just like anybody else, if you
Sure.
don't know, you just where to put the fly and how to fight him. He's a big, strong moose of a guy, and he was actually a wrestler, professional, not professional, but a wrestler in
High-end
college,
wrestler.
yeah. And you could see why. He was just massively strong. So we started catching a lot of tarpon. In fact, I think we fished the Gold Cup 2 or 3 years before I started fishing Sandy. We started fishing the Gold Cup in like 77 or something. The first year, I think we caught 1 weight fish and a couple of releases, but the last year we fished, like 4 years, we came in second by 5. We missed winning by 5 points. Yeah, so out of like
8 ounces.
3,000 points, we were 5 points shy of winning. So
Who won that year?
I'll think of his name. It was Ben Hardesty,
Right.
fishing with Hank Brown. They won. Yeah, but we learned how to catch tarpon.
What was it about Tom that made him so good? Because his fighting skills are legendary.
Yeah, just fighting fish, just unmerciful on a fish. If you've ever caught a big tarpon, and you guys have, you know, I mean, you just don't let them up for air. You just don't, that to make a pun, but they do want to come up and roll and extends the fight sometimes. But when a tarpon explodes and jumps, you just let him jump. And as soon as he lands back in the water,
You whack him.
he's
Pull.
going backwards.
Pull, yeah.
And if he jumps again, let him go, and then hits the water. When he hits the water, he's in reverse. So you just have to overwhelm them, you know. So you don't beat them physically, you beat them mentally, I think. You just kind of, nothing's working for them, and just be super aggressive. I tell people, I said, you know, break them off if you want. Break some of these fish off. The biggest problem with people is when they hook a big tarpon that haven't caught one, or even not that many, or one that's especially large, is they start being careful.
Because they want to catch it so badly.
They want to catch it so badly. I said,
Right.
if you want to catch it that badly, you're not going to get them in, because you're going to diddly-dick around.
Something
and,
bad's going to happen.
You need to know your limit.
You have to know your limit.
Yeah, you need to break some off.
You have to
so
break
can-
some off. Yeah, you have to know how hard you can pull. You have to watch the body language of the fish, and you can tell when a tarpon, you're fighting him and you're moving, then he coils up like a snake, and he's going somewhere
gonna bolt.
in the next
Right.
second. You got to be ready to just boom, let him jump, and it hits the water. Not so fast, Schwartz.
So back then, did you really have to feed the fish? Or if they saw the fly, would they just come over?
Quite honestly, there were places even then that the fish were more difficult. This
Right.
is like in the early 70s, but they wanted to eat chicken. They were any kind of chicken, any kind of orange and yellow, black.
Make it
God.
move.
You
and
could throw
he's-
orange and yellow on the ocean side, which is a lot what these worm flies are today. But I mean, we threw mostly like on the ocean, grizzly, you know, and kind of light colored stuff, tan, like a lot of guys used to throw till recently. Now everybody's throwing that piece of string out there.
Right.
But it's they bit much better. I mean,
They're pretty forgiving.
yeah,
They wanted to
really
bite.
are. Yeah.
What about when you first gravitated to Homosassa? You know, what was the situation, and how did you end up there with Tom?
We were having breakfast, and wasn't back then. It wasn't Stouts. We were in a place. Might have been Ted and Mary. Anyway, it's not important. We were in a little restaurant having breakfast, and we were headed down to Loggerhead to go tarpon fishing. Loggerhead's an island on the ocean side of the Lower Keys, and there was a guy in there who I knew, who had actually was a civil engineer and had worked on 7 Mile Bridge. His name is Norman Duncan, and a very, very good fisherman, great fisherman. And he showed us a picture of a tarpon that he'd caught up there, and it was a big damn tarpon, huge tarpon, and it was blowing and raining, and so this is in 1976. And we went down to Loggerhead and we're pulling around Hommel's Corner, you know,
Sure.
that inside basin, and we'd see a tarpon roll over there, blowing sideways and raining, and we also, I think we've been in Coupon Bite, talking about, you know, we were in Coupon Bite earlier anyhow, so we're out there, and he says, man, this really sucks. I said, absolutely. He says, what do you think about that Homosassa place? I said, man, I need a road map. I don't have any idea where it is or how to get there. And he said, think we ought to try it. I said, well, we're not doing anything here. Just let's load this boat and go, you know. So we did. We went in, put the boat on the trailer. I told my wife I'd be back in about a week, and we drove up there and ran out in this Chassahowitzka Bay, which is kind of a nucleus for that tarpon fishing up there. We had heard that, and so we didn't see anything, nothing, zero. And then went down south of there where there's some light-colored bottom, also saw zero. And Tom says, you know, there's got to be here somewhere. So Tom had his own plane, but he had flown his plane. I don't think he rode up there with me. He had left his plane in Marathon. But anyhow, we went in and actually hired a pilot in a little Cessna and went up and drove around that afternoon. And I looked down, and we were like, you know, a quarter of a mile from a million fish when we weren't seeing anything. We hadn't seen one roll or anything. But and the next day we got on them and started smacking them, yeah. And I couldn't believe, I mean, for all the tarpon that we'd caught in the Keys, and caught some good ones, you know. The first couple we hooked, it was like, what the hell is that? It looked like a flying manatee, you know. It's just unbelievable, the proportionately larger fish up there. You know, we galvanized on that. So we fished about a week there, and we spent the whole month of, in 1977, the whole month up there. Tom actually caught his first world record up there that month. On Memorial Day of 1977, he landed his 7th fish for that day, and 5 of them were over 150 pounds, and the 7th one was 177, which we took in. It was a world record, but there was not a boat on the horizon in any direction. It was flat calm, and as far as you could see were daisy chaining schools of tarpon. We ran for like half an hour to get out of there, and we were blowing tarpon for half an hour running, just solid friggin' tarpon.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was just...
It's like a Serengeti of tarpon.
We saw one daisy chain. I don't know, you know the Ballantine beer label, which is like 5 circles together on a balance. There was like 5 circles.
Like
and
the Olympic
tarpon,
rings. Like Olympic rings.
Yeah, exactly like Olympic rings. And they were leaving one circle and going into another circle and going into another circle and circling around. It's just like a seething mass, like 400 tarpon in this school. Just like crazy. And we'd sit off the edge and we'd look for wide ones, you know, because they're coming around the edge.
Specific fish.
Specific, trying to feed the fat faces, we said.
And this is light bottom sand.
White sand.
White sand.
And
But those fish were like right on the surface. I mean, they were just, their backs out, just waddling. You've seen it. Holy cow.
You're talking about nirvana.
Oh, it was like stupid. It was crazy, actually.
You probably didn't sleep very well those 40 days up there.
I didn't. Or
you're probably so tired you passed out.
Well, I was tying flies at night, making leaders, you know. Tom was complaining because his hands were cut from all kinds of backing cups. I said, nobody's crying for your ass, man. I'm supposed to feel sad? You're reeling all these things in?
What was it like for you as a guide to know every day you were going to go out? And I mentioned the same statement to Evans recently. You guys were like Ahab and the whale. You were going out to kill a fish, a specific fish. What was that like for you, and what was it like for you as a guide to have that gaff sharpened and knowing that you were going to stick something? And what was it like to actually get that fish on the hook?
if you've never gaffed a tarpon, and not many people have today because you're not allowed to kill them unless you buy a special tag and all this stuff. And that's a great thing because they learn now that some of these fish get 50, 60 years old, 70 maybe sometimes. So we're just killing all these great animals, for our own glory, obviously. But when you have a fish that's, 7 feet long and weighs more than you do proportionally, and you drive a hunk of steel into their back, I don't know of anyone that's ever done it that their heart wasn't beating out of their chest. And you have such an adrenaline rush, I mean, it's just like every fiber in your body is tingling, and you slam this hunk of steel into their back. If you're fortunate enough to stay in the boat, because I've been pulled overboard probably 10 times gaffing tarpon, just snatch you right out of your shoes, and you're just zooming along in the water with them, trying to get your feet down, trying to reach up and grab them in the face and get a hold of them, So it's
probably one of the most exciting things you've ever done.
I've never had a rush like that ever doing anything. Yeah, I was having dinner one night with Stu App and Ralph Delph, who is probably the best fisherman that has ever been in South Florida.
Wow.
And I'm statement.
That guy, I always said he could catch a marlin in a mud puddle. That guy would figure out how to catch fish. I mean, the guy was amazing. He'd catch fish so many different ways, figure out how to do things that were actually impossible to do. How about a 103-pound amberjack on a fly rod? This is years ago, Hooked it over, teased it off a wreck, cut loose, drifted away from the wreck a half a mile before he allowed his angler to catch it, to cast to it. Teased it on a Calcutta rod with a blue runner, pulled the fish off the wreck, and when the fish was almost exhausted and losing interest in, and so he dinked the fly in there. So
wow,
he exhausted the fish before the guy hooked it.
Right.
Wow.
So
ingenious.
So clever, Anyhow, I was having dinner with these guys, and Ralph said, because I think I'd gotten snatched out of the boat the day before or something. He says, there's not a fish in the world that could pull me out of the boat. I go, yeah, good for you, man. I said, I weigh 160 pounds, and I'm not glued to the floor, So the next day we were fishing up off these St. Martin's Keys. I went up there. Stu and Ralph were way to the south, and there weren't anything swimming down there, and I was like thick in them, So I talked to Stu on the radio, and they ran up there, and I see him casting, and Stu hooks his fish. You should get Stu App to tell you this story because he's told it a million times. He'll never forget it. I was watching him, though, and they get this fish over to the boat, and I see Ralph's got a gaff, so I know it's a good one, It looked like a pelican diving when he gaffed him. He went soaring through the air and got drilled into the water and flopping around. The fish came off the gaff. He swam back to the boat. Stu still got the fish on, and they get up there again. And they run up alongside this fish, and it looked like another pelican diving. So he got pulled over twice by the same fish, and the fish broke off in the gaff. Stu thinks it was 230.
On 12-pound test, I think, too.
It might have been 12, yeah. I don't know, but it was
enormous.
It was a friggin' monster, but it was so.
Tell me the story about
he could get pulled over.
Living proof. Well, tell me about the time you got ripped out of the boat with Sandy in the Gold Cup at 7 Mile.
We were fishing in the Gold Cup. We were on this little bank that these tarpon kind of slow roll along the edge, and one roll right next to us. Sandy made a good cast, hooks the fish. The fish runs off, and you kind of make a judgment while these things are jumping. Is that a weight fish? Weight fish had to be at least 70 pounds.
Right.
So, and this was obviously a weight fish because it looked like 100 plus. It jumps around. It jumped straight away, jumping like half a dozen times. Swimming in the air type jumps, and while that's happening, it's too deep to pull the boat. I cranked up the boat and we were kind of idling that way, and I was getting the gaff out. I put the gaff in. I strap it to my arm with a sliding lanyard. It kind of slides to the end and stops, so it slides.
So you're connected.
I'm glued to this thing, and the fish comes running straight back at the boat and jumps like 3 times and lands upside down right next to the boat. This is 3 minutes after hooking the fish, and I gotta go. So I gaffed this fish.
And you went.
Oh, I know. I said, Sandy, come get me, because I knew could not stay in the boat. This fish was just green as, and zoom, tows me to the bottom, and it's like 15 feet deep, and we're kind of zooming along on the bottom, and I see I'm holding on to the gaff, and out in front of me, I can just see this fish's tail and I'm thinking, I got to get out of this thing. I'm either going to drown or something, because I can't stay in there forever. And then he angles up towards the surface, and he's going up, and I'm thinking, oh, this is cool. I'm going to see a tarpon jump from underneath. When something like that crazy is happening, and I'm sure you've probably been involved with this, everything is so perfect. I mean, you can just see everything that's happening. You're just so focused.
It's like slow motion almost.
It is slow. You ever see that? It's just like everything slows down, And so I say, okay, this is cool. I'm going to see one jump from underneath and maybe get a gulp of air or two while I'm up there. And I see the fish break the surface, go crashing through the surface. Sandy said he only came out to his like pectoral fins, but Sandy alertly came over and he shot over there with the boat and he grabbed me by the ankle. And so I'm stretched out with it. He's got me by the ankle and I'm stretched out. And the gaff is stretched out, and he pulls me back in, and I pass the gaff handle on to him. And we get the fish. It was 107 pounds in 3 minutes.
And you ended up with a gaff through your arm at one time, too.
That was a different fish, yeah. That was when I was under the boat with one. He towed me under the boat, and we were clunking around under the boat, and finally the gaff handle comes out. I said, get the gaff, and Sandy pulls it up, and the tarpon was on it, went in here and came out over here. Just short of the barb. I got a big barb on this thing. The barb is a folding barb that folds down into the shank of the gaff and into the steel and pops open when it passes it. So luckily, I just lifted my arm off, but it was a half-inch hole all the way through my arm.
Let's go back to Homosassa briefly and about what was going on up there. Catching these big things and trying to catch world records. Tell me some of the funny stories up there, like the story about that big fish that you caught, Ricketta, and the apple story.
Well, I was fishing with Tom one day. It was blowing pretty good.
And who was Ricketta? Let's go back to Ricketta.
Ricketta was a name. Most of those giant tarpon are females. Basically all of them, I think. And the smaller fish we called Rocky. We were calling them Rocky. And so what are we going to call these giant ones? Tom said Ricketta, because you can picture a Ricketta with giant tits hanging down. Every time we saw a boat where a twin-engine boat had gone over a bank and cut twin wheel ditches, we always used to say, Rocketta's been here. So Ricketta was like this legendary fish that we were trying to capture. And so Tom I think he'd caught a fish, but Tom had to take a crap. So he said, if anything comes by, just cast to it. And I said, all right, okay. So I stripped out some line. He didn't have it stripped out. So I stripped out some line, and I missed one school while I was stripping the line out. I wasn't ready yet. And then here comes 3 fish, and I threw it out in front of them, and I was short by about 6 feet. But I didn't have to. They were going to get away from me if I stripped it all. So I said, I just let them get even with it. And I bumped it one time, and this fish went like that, and he came over there, and he took the fly. And I set the hook, and it jumps right next to Tom, who's hanging over the back of the boat. And he says, Jesus Christ, it's Ricketta. So we were talking about fighting a fish aggressively, So I'm taking time out of his day. And so I just pulled like hell on this fish, I'm just ripping at it, because I want to get it in and get it over with. And I got up there, and it was Ricketta. And I knew I'd probably never myself personally ever catch a tarpon that big again, so I decided I'd like to keep it and have it mounted, you know. So Tom gaffed it, probably the only tarpon he's ever gaffed, and he gaffed it for me, put it in the boat, and we took it in and weighed it. It weighed 186 pounds, and
it was 10 pounds over the current world record or something like that at the time.
the record at the time was 170.
So it was like 16 pounds.
16 pounds heavier. So, but I didn't enter it for a record because I didn't want to make what he was doing more difficult.
Right.
You know, and I'm just
Yeah.
a meggly old fishing guy. I don't care about this stuff.
Do you still have that mount?
I do. It's right out there on the
Is
wall.
it?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's been sitting in that other garage for years. But so when we came back in, Tom called his wife. And I'll never forget how he started the conversation. I just took the worst shit of my life.
That's Tom for you.
Yeah, that would be Tom.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
Well,
and then after I quit fishing Tom, I was fishing a variety of guys up there for like a week each, and I would take 5 days in tarpon season and fish with a really good friend and a great fishing guide buddy of mine who was also fishing up there. We'd take the same 5 days off and fish together as Dale Perez. Dale used to be a major league baseball player. So he had a great arm on him. I played the outfield so he could stroke it in, you know.
Right.
And we chased these daisy chains. And the fish, but if you ever watch one of these daisy chains, it was kind of weird. They'd be swimming. A school of fish would be just swimming. And then one fish, I don't know if it was a male or a female, but one fish would just go smoking through the school, and the whole school would explode and start daisy chaining, you know. It was kind of like maybe a signal, hey,
Right. Let's have a party.
do what we do. So we'd be chasing these things, and they wouldn't daisy chain. We're trying to catch them, and Dale, the box lunches up there had apples in them. So Dale would like launch an apple, you know, I don't know how far he threw it forever, the guy. And it would land into the school of tarpon. They'd just boom, they'd all explode and start daisy chaining. We'd go up there and hook one. So it worked pretty cool.
And didn't you or Dale hook one of your guys' biggest fish ever together?
I hooked it, yeah.
You hooked it.
Yeah.
And you said it was closer to 300 than 200?
I think it was. The thing looked like a friggin' manatee flying out of the water. It was spooky. And when that fish took the fly, I was stripping the fly. I remember it was a little purple grizzly fly. Stripping that fly, and that thing opened his mouth, and he had a mouth probably about like that. I mean, it looked like a garbage can. And Dale was standing up there. He was polling me. He goes, "Oh, my God." And I set the hook in this thing, and that thing came flying out of the water. It was just gargantuan, monstrous fish. The biggest tarpon I've ever seen. I saw a tarpon in Florida Bay one time, never hooked it, swim by the boat one time that looked like 300-pound tarpon. I mean, just massive thing, you know, back like this, you know. 8 feet long.
Wow.
Crazy. That was on Schooner Bank. You know, you fish Schooner
Right.
Bank.
Yeah.
So. But anyhow, I fought it for like 10 minutes, and the mouth was so big he ate the shock and all the way up on the tip it frayed off.
You've had a number of world records. The one you caught with Dell, that 42-pound permit on 8.
41 and a half, yeah.
Yeah. And you had a 2-pound permit record with him.
And a 4-pound record.
And you got the 127.5-pound
Tarpon.
tarpon on 8.
That's still a record, yeah.
What is the best record, if you can assess that?
The best record, that 41 and a half pound permit that Dell caught, that was on 8-pound tippet. The day before, he set the world record on 8-pound tippet at like 23 pounds or something. But we thought that we could catch a bigger one. And so we saw this thing. This fish was going down a bank away from us feeding. And I said, Dell, I got to get around him to get a good shot. So I pulled way out around him, and because I didn't want to hit him in the tail. So I pulled way out around him so he could get a fly out in front of him. And he threw it over there and hit him in the tail. And the thing just spun around, grabbed the fly, and took off. And he fought that fish for an hour and 3 minutes. It got off in deep water, right next to Key West Harbor, you know. Got off into deep water, pulling on this thing. I was going to gaff it, too. We were going to kill this sucker. I knew it was huge, and I figured it was. And I was reaching out with the gaff at one point, and a tarpon free jumped and landed right on top of the fish. just a free jumper from nowhere. The thing ran like 100 yards, just screaming like, holy shit. We almost had this thing. But that did him in, So we got back up on the fish and I gaffed him. So that fish, that particular fish, somebody someday may catch a bigger permit on a fly, but it's not likely that it'll ever be on 8-pound.
No.
And maybe never, because I don't think, I have a lot of friends that are guides down there, and they're not seeing that kind of fish down there anymore.
Right.
Proportionally that large, I've seen bigger ones, yeah, but I've never hooked a bigger one than that. I think that was the biggest one I had. So we gaffed it and brought it in, but Del Brown's best catch ever was a 9-pound, 12-ounce fish on 2-pound test, which has been beaten here recently by a friend of mine in Key West, but that was the best job of him fighting a fish that we've ever had, because, first of all, Del was probably in his 60s, much more capable of what's going on and reaction time. Yeah. Reaction time is everything. I mean, I'm 73, so there's no 73-year-olds in the NBA. I've never seen one yet. But he hooked that fish, and it ran through a bunch of mangrove chutes, and he steered his line through the mangrove chutes. We were going down, the fish hooked him on a flat, but he ran down into a channel, and there was an island in the middle, but channel through these islands and a little island in the middle. And we had rehearsed how this is going to go down, because I was running the boat trying to because 2-pound test can't tow a fly line through the water, right?
It'll break.
Yeah.
Too much drag.
The line drag itself will break the tippet.
Right.
So he had actually took a 7-weight line and cut the running line off and put amnesia, which is a monofilament oval-shaped mono, instead, so it's much smaller running line. But even at that, it couldn't pull through the water. So we're going down. As soon as he hooked up, I threw a boat cushion on the bow, so for him to kneel on. We had all this rehearsed. This is what we were going to do. Like, we were actually going to pull this shit off. So he was kneeling on it, because I was juking the boat all around to keep from throwing him out of the boat, So the fish is going with the current down this island. And there's an island, and he's going right at the island. He hasn't picked the side yet. And I said, Del, as soon as he picks the side, I got to know which side it is, because the current's pushing me. I don't know.
You can't.
It's hard to. And he started down the left side. I said, he's going left. I started down the left side. And he said, he's coming back. And the thing came ripping around the boat. And I spun the boat in a circle and shot around. And there was a cut bank, mangroves hanging in the water. And the fish was like under the mangroves. And he stuck his rod down in the water, cleared everything, went out on a flat that was full of mangrove shoots. And
death.
I was gunning the engine, throwing mud all over the place, went through all these mangrove chutes. He was steering his line through the mangrove chutes. If it had touched one, it would have just twank,
Right.
And it went over into a lake, Turkey Basin. Went over into Turkey Basin and went up and down through Turkey Basin. And I netted that fish, but, yeah, that was probably, as far as an angler skill level, messing around with 2-pound test. Have you ever tried 2-pound test?
Tying a knot is crazy.
Yeah, we had a 10-pound test shock leader. Okay, you had to have a shock leader because they'll rub their face on the bottom. So we had like a 10-pound test shock leader, but the Bimini twist is only like that long.
Right.
It's like an eighth of it. It's stupid stuff. So anybody that does that's got to be sick in the head. Yeah. So that's probably Del's best catch. That 127-pound tarpon. We were looking for permit, and all these tarpon were swimming by us. We were out off 7 Mile Bridge on those banks way out there, And so we sat down to eat lunch, and we'd hooked a bunch of them on 8-pound, and never, 3 jumps, gone, fight them for 5 minutes, gone. So this, I looked down the bank, and here's a tarpon. We're sitting there having a ham sandwich, and I said, Del, here comes one. He said, oh, you think I should throw it to it? Yeah, why not, Put your sandwich down, give it a shot. And he threw over there, and the fish took the fly and jumped like 15 times on the first going away, And the line just screaming, and it's like wrecking my lunch. and things and it was still on. I said, holy crap, the stupid thing's still on. So So Dell was pulling on it, but I don't know how much he was pulling on it. So we had gone. The thing went with the current, and we were way down by some islands there, and I was noticing that the fish was right on the bottom, but it was only like 4 feet deep, and he was right on the bottom, and I could run the boat, get right around next to him. He's down there, you know. I said, Dell, I'm going to try this thing. This was like after a couple hours, I think. I don't remember the length of time. It was like 2 hours and something. And so I put the gaff in the water right over his head, and I just let it fall because he was all the way on the bottom. And when I thought it was somewhere around the fish, just guessing, you know, because you couldn't tell the refraction of the water and where the hell it was in relation to the ship, I just yanked back, and it went right through the fish's peduncle, right through just in front of his tail, you know. Oh, and I also had told Dell, do me a favor, I'm not going to stay in the boat with this thing, because you're leaning way out. I said, you know, just first thing I want you to do is reach back and turn off the engine, because if he tows me under the boat, I'll get chopped up. The boat was in gear, and we're idling alongside of it. Right. You know, I don't want to get whacked by the prop. So the fish went under the boat and went the opposite direction the boat was going, and he's towing me. I was actually skating across the surface on my chest, you know, just planing. He had me planing. And finally, he slowed down enough. I got my feet on the bottom, reached up and grabbed my hand in his gills, and I looked back, and Dell, the boat is still idling.
Over the horizon.
100 yards away. And he's like, oh, come on back. And he starts steering, and he's reeling up his line. As he's coming back, he's reeling up his line, you know. It's like he doesn't want to damage his fly line.
Right.
We got the thing in, and it was 127 pounds. So,
on 8.
Yeah.
Has this given you a new sense of youth and fire fishing with Nathaniel now? Nathaniel Linville with the 6-pound record stuff.
Yeah,
tarpon.
It's fun to do.
Does that bring in a new level of like spunk back?
I never lost any of that.
Yeah.
No, I love doing that sort of stuff, you know, and it's.
But you haven't been doing it for some time, so it's gotten you back into the game, if you will, in some way. That kind of a game.
We have fun doing it, you know. We have fun. We fought tarpon, I think, over 100 hours, you know, at a ridiculously big fish, you know, and
into the middle of the night. What's that like?
All night. Lost one the following morning.
Like 14 hours later.
14 hours, yeah, stuff like that. Yeah, occasionally Nathaniel Linville is like a phenomenal fisherman. I mean, a beautiful caster. Like Nicky, just knows what's happening out there. Boom, you know, recognizes everything, you know, what's happening, where to put the fly, when he's got it, you know, all that body language. But every once in a while he says, I think I'm moving them. And I said, you are so full of shit. That goddamn fish doesn't have a clue that you're on there, you know.
Pull.
The only thing that's going to catch this fish is we get close enough and stab him in the back with this big hook, because that's the only thing that he's going to be interested in, you know. So, but the guy's a great fisherman. We have a lot of fun doing it.
And also too, you got your son Chad as your gaff man.
Chad's a gaff man. Chad got snatched out of the boat last year. The fish came off the gaff, pulled him underwater. He disappeared for a while. I was thinking,
aren't you glad that's not you anymore?
Yeah, he was. You know, he was up on the shore. I got him, and he was gone. You know, zoom, looked like
Chad's
a bobber
a big guy.
going down. Huh?
Chad's a big guy.
Yeah, he's 230. You know, and he's not fat. You know, he's just a massive character. My son Chad. He's guiding now too. He's just a great fisherman himself. You know, so we have, you know what? It's
good fun.
That's all life experiences. You know, and if I live long enough, we'll catch that record. If not, it's just not important. It's the pursuit is everything, you know. It's almost be a letdown to actually happen, you know, because we've been trying for a while. We thought it was just myself and Nathaniel. He hooked a tarpon about 170 on 6. And if we'd had a gaff guy in there, we would have gotten a gaff on him, because I had set lights up, spotlight on the bow, but he swam right by the boat, but I was driving the boat. By the time I had the gaff on my hand, but by the time I could run up there, he'd disappear into the darkness, you know.
Right.
But that would have been a catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have lasted for a while.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, let's go back 60 years, you know, for your childhood growing up. Tell me about your first fishing rod, your first fish, and, you know, those early years.
Wow.
Is that okay?
Sure. I mean, so I grew up in Miami, and my my mother and father were divorced when I was 10. And the last time I saw my father, he came by the house and he brought me a fishing rod. He had bought me a fishing rod. I had never fished. I fished with a cane pole for bass and brim and freshwater lakes, but never really anything type of a game fish or something. So he came by the house and he left this spinning rod. And I didn't know how to tie a knot. I didn't know anything, So, but I bought a little lure, and there was a canal a couple of blocks from my house. I went over there and I threw out a little lure out there, and I caught a snook about a foot long, which I killed immediately.
And you froze it, right?
I put it in the refrigerator. Yeah, I froze it solid. I didn't know what it was.
You thought it was a striped bass? Is that?
I thought it was. I thought it was a striped bass. So I didn't know. I looked in this fish book and there was things with stripes on it. And I said, this must be a striped bass. And somebody, my sister's boyfriend, actually came by the house. And said, hey, you caught a snook? And I said, well, anyhow, that was like the coolest thing that had ever happened to me in my life. So then I became, going fishing every chance I get. I actually learned how to tie knots. I learned how to tie a clinch knot. I used to ride my bicycle down to Biscayne Bay, and I'd catch crevalle jacks, and I'd fill a basket with these little crevalle jacks, and then on my way home, I went by a Pontiac dealership, and these guys that were waxing and cleaning the cars would give me a dime a piece for the jacks, I was commercial fishing around. And then I'd ride over to a donut shop and spend all my money there. And I was in there getting donuts, and I had my rod stuck in. I made rod racks on my bicycle. Some guy goes, hey, kid, is that your rod? I said, yeah. He said, that is the worst looking fucking knot I've ever seen in my life. I said, let me show you how to tie a proper knot. So he showed me how to tie a clinch knot. And then my sister's boyfriend's brother taught me how to tie a bimini twist. Anyhow, it's just the way I learned. So.
Right.
But my dad, I never saw my dad after that day. So he just went off and did what he did. Yeah.
Was your mom your hero?
My mom
She raised you.
She did. She paid for my education. She did. She worked. My mom was a dress designer and dressmaker. Worked her whole life until she was 82. She worked making dresses, and she put me through school. So, she didn't know anything about the outdoors. She was not an outdoors person at all, never anything about fishing. When I told her I wanted to be a fishing guide, she says, they're all a bunch of drunks and bums. You'll never amount to anything, which is probably where I am right now. But at any
we
rate,
all know better.
But, so I was a student of all the guides and the keys. I'd read the newspaper, and I read about Joe Brooks and these guys catching these tarpon with fly rods. I got a fly rod. I didn't know what a fly was, but my mother got me a fly rod with S&H green stamps, which used to be like you could collect enough stamps at the grocery store and you could get items. And it was a South Bend piece of garbage and a rod and a sea-level line. It was like a level line. And I didn't know what a fly was, but I bought this thing. It was called a Bill Smith lure. It weighed 1/3 of an ounce. Had a big cork head and lead cast inside of it, but it had feathers. So I thought if it had feathers, it had to be a fly. And I proceeded to thrash myself to death with it.
So you were
I couldn't cast
trying
it.
to fly cast a jig.
I couldn't cast it out of my shadow. I thought, I don't know, the people that do catching those fish must be like superhuman. They must be superhuman. How do they do that? It said Joe Brooks could cast 70 feet into a 20-mile-an-hour wind. I thought, holy crap, I can't cast it out of my shadow. How does this work? Anyhow, eventually I learned how to do all that stuff.
When did you realize that fishing, your life, your career was going to be on the water? Was there
I wanted to be a
switch
fishing guide
that flipped, or you just knew?
No, I just wanted to be a fishing guide.
From that first snook?
Yeah, so when I got a driver's license, every weekend, myself and some buddies, we'd drive to the Keys. We'd sleep on the bridges at night. We'd catch millions of fish off those bridges and the Keys. Long Key Bridge especially, that's where we spent our time. One time we'd camp on the bridge. They used to have catwalks on the bridge. Wooden catwalks that were built for fishermen. You had to walk in the roadbed and then go out onto the catwalk. There's always big signs, fishing on the catwalk only, which as kids, we were arrested 3 different times for we never fished on the catwalk.
Catwalk, of
But we
course.
slept on the catwalk. We put tents up with nails and slept out there on the bridge. Caught permit and snook and tarpon, all this stuff. Giant sharks at night. We'd put out shark rods and crazy stuff, you know.
Crawling down manhole covers in
Well,
Miami.
that was in Haulover. I was in Haulover in Miami. There was a Haulover cut. Yeah, I used to climb down. There was a manhole cover. They finally welded it shut, which pissed me off. But somebody get killed doing that stuff.
What is it about fishing that gets to you and inside your core? Is it the tug, the adventure?
I think it's. Yeah, I mean, it's fishing. If you take it seriously, it's a giant puzzle. You know, I mean, you're trying to trick something the size of a brain, the size of a pea, but it's kind of a puzzle when you put it together about what makes them be in a certain place and how the current's running, all this different variables that go into choosing a spot to stop and go look, you know, and then actually pulling it off, you know. I mean, start to recognize what the fish are looking for and say, well, they're here. Maybe they should be over there too, you know. So you go over there, and sure enough, you know. So you start picking off, getting little clues about fish habits and all that stuff. But the biggest thing and the most rewarding thing of all, I think, is just the bite. Just going to a place like that you've figured out, and you go, okay, they should be there, and throwing up here and let the fly wash along and get it where you ought to be right there.
Right.
So just the strike, the
Right.
figuring it out, and you know, there's just like hundreds of places, thousands of places like that. God knows how many places I've fished in South Florida, you know. So, and it's a challenge. I mean, if it was easy to do, that's why I think permit is such a popular saltwater game fish, is because it's a huge challenge, you know. People want a challenge. I'm going, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to Baja to fish for these rooster fish from the beach. They're not teased. They're just swimming up and down the beach. And you see, get like 3 or 4 shots a day would be a great day. And they don't bite for shit, you know. But when you catch one, it's so very cool, you know.
Yeah.
So I'd rather catch one fish in a week or none and have it be a challenge than to go out there and bail them. Who cares about that, you know. I just caught a bunch of fish, so I'd rather have something that's hard.
Where did you learn your work ethic? From your mom? Because you've been known to work harder than anyone.
Probably from my mom. I don't know. My mom, when I was a kid, I'd get up and in the middle of the night, and she'd be downstairs sewing, you know, because she had to get this garment ready for some lady to go to a extravaganza somewhere, you know. So she'd be up all night sometimes sewing. She'd be crying. She'd be so tired, but she'd be doing it. So I don't know. Plus, I also ever thought, so you hire a guide, it's a significant expenditure. It's a lot of money. I feel like I want to earn it, you know. So I might not catch a fish or even get an opportunity to fish, but I'm going to try my ass off to get something.
But that also, too, translates to your daily life. When you go on a bike ride, tell us about that kind of pain. Now, you don't just go on a bike ride. You ride your bike twice across the country.
Yeah, but that's, you just get on the thing and start pedaling and you go somewhere.
You love pain, don't you?
I don't think it's pain because I'm not in pain. I just love the experience. I love the adventure. It's an adventure. Life is an adventure. You know, how many people spend their whole life sitting on a couch looking at what, you know? So, you know,
But that's easier.
I'm out there. I'm not gonna have any regrets. I'm gonna be dust someday, you know. But in the meantime,
You're gonna make.
I'm gonna be out there trying
doing
to catch crap, and yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to get out there again. You know, I got to go fix a stove tomorrow or something. As soon as that's done, I'm going fishing.
What is one of your better inventions that you're most proud of? You know, with boat designs. I mean, did you design the Dolphin Super Skiff?
No, I didn't.
But it's been your boat, your go-to boat for a long time.
That particular boat is an incredibly good riding boat in deep water. It's a good open water boat. It's 16 feet long, but it just got a real good V. That boat was designed by David Exley, who, it's really the only boat he ever designed, and that boat was originally flat bottom. And it beat your fillings would come out in the thing. You couldn't hardly run it, you know.
Right.
So he just took some, changed his mold and put a V on the bottom of it, and in the process made it a very dry boat because the flat part of the bottom will throw the water out to the shape of the hull. So I kind of got onto that, and but I didn't design it. I designed the cap and the layout because they weren't, Dolphin Boat Company wasn't making a fishing boat. They were making a runabout. So I designed a cap, and
So you inspired it to become that fly fishing skiff.
probably, yeah. But there was a guy in Islamorada whose boat I borrowed one day and went out in, and he was fishing out of. His name was Dickie Moeller, and Dickie Moeller had one that he was bone fishing out of, and he said, "Man, this is a really cool little boat for bone fishing." It was a runabout, though, you know. It had leather seats and all that crap and stand on the front deck. But so after I took that out and fished it for a day, I thought, man, this is a great little boat for this, but not in this configuration. So I did the first cap on one of those, first layout, make it a fishing boat.
You've also inspired a cult down in the lower keys.
A Colt?
Somewhat of a cult with the super skiffs, the bandanas, the no trolling motor. They want to keep it real old
You've
school.
inspired a whole generation.
You have.
I just do what I do. And I've been reasonably successful at it. And I've known a lot of those guys since they were kids, you know, a lot of these fishing guides.
Right.
And maybe my fishing ethics have kind of gone on to them as
Translated.
far as doing it the right way, picking up a push pole, framing it down the boat. I was the first person to ever start covering my face. That was with a bandana, which I still wear. But all these buffs and everything are a byproduct of that. I was the first person to trailer a boat. When I started guiding down there, nobody trailered. You stayed at a marina. All the guides fished out of a given marina.
Mm.
I was sitting in in Marathon one day. It was blowing like hell out of the north. There was no way to get out of the marina even without getting killed. And I had this guy, and I said, let's just load this thing up and drive to Big Pine and we'll go fishing. And we did, and had a great day. So I wasn't more than a year later, I gave up my spot at the marina. This is in 1969, and just started trailering every day. And now I don't know if they're... Bud Mary's is a fishing marina,
Right.
but they still, most of those guys
The
pull their boat out at night and put it back in again, you know.
Skiff guys always trailer.
It's good guys
most
trailer.
part.
I was the first person to range away from one little spot, you know.
What happened? When did you decide that, the Clearwater Keys fishing was no longer where you wanted to be, and you made this big move up to Everglades City?
I just thought...
What happened?
Well, I've been trailering a boat for like 25 years up and down those roads. Never had an accident. I thought I was like testing the limits of my good luck, you know. Plus, I was living in Marathon, but I was fishing out of Ocean Reef some days. I was fishing out of Key West a ton. I was like an hour on the road. I come in, get back to the dock at 5 o'clock or 5:30, and then trailer, get home at 7:15 or 7:30, and so there's a lot of road time. Which I thought always considered kind of dangerous. And then I saw the increased pressure on the fishery and the number of guides. The first time I ever went out of Sugarloaf Lodge and ran out on the Gulf side, I never saw a single boat. This was like in 1968 or something. Never laid eyes on a boat all day. Not a guide skiff. There was some spongers out there that live on their boats and harvest sponges, but that was it. There was not a guide, not a person. When I started fishing out of Key West, there was one guide, Bob Montgomery, who was guiding, and he did a lot of offshore stuff too. So nobody was skiff guiding, And I didn't know squat, man. I was just like...
So you're probably finding good stuff a fair amount of the time.
Oh yeah, I mean, you
Go anywhere, good edge.
Fish everywhere. There's just more in some places.
So you were the only one in Key West, skiff guide.
Well, I didn't live in Key West. I was
Right.
trailering down
Right.
there, but there was nobody skiff guiding but Bob Montgomery. He had a brother, Gene, who did it part-time. I think Gene was in the Navy and guided part-time. But I was the only guy that was going down there fishing them every day. Bob Montgomery had a boat called the Blue Runner, which is a beautiful little boat, and he used to fish a lot of wrecks and stuff too. But he did some flats fishing. He's a good fisherman.
Who pushed you other than yourself? Another guy per se, like maybe Harry Spear, and you guys, won a lot of the tournaments. Was there another guy that was like a rival of yours that we pushed each other and tried to?
No, Harry didn't push me either. I mean, you don't.
Just push yourself.
When you're a guide, you just go out there and try as hard as you can.
Right.
Just every single day,
So you were your own barometer. You were setting your own.
Yeah, I still do it. I mean, if it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm not doing anything where I am, and I feel like there's a spot 15 miles further away, I'm going. Absolutely, I'm going down there.
But after all these years and all these fish you caught, you still want to go to that one more spot, catch one more fish.
That's actually a problem that I've had, because some people want to go home. They actually want to go home. I used to have debates with Dell. He said, I'm ready to go in. I said, I'm not taking you, and we got a couple more spots to try. I said, no, I'm really tired. In fact, that's what happened with Dell and I, is that he was so he had the same passion that I did, but I did not let him get old. I didn't let Del Brown get old, because I wanted Del Brown to stay,
in the game.
In the game. And he was like 85, and I wouldn't take him home. And so we were in a spot, and he said, I'm really tired. I'm ready to go in. I said, Del, the tide's going to be just perfect along this edge at exactly 4:30. I said, we'll catch a permit there. And the day before, I had to talk him into staying out. We'd catch a permit. He says, why do I ever doubt you? You always pull this out. I said, well, yeah, because we're out here. So anyhow, so I got there early, and I pulled over this flat for like half an hour, straight into like a 15, 20 mile an hour wind to get to this edge, And I get to the edge, and I get the boat all set up, and the current's just about to get right, What we wanted was a high faller, And got a boat all set up, and he goes, he reeled in his line. So what are you doing? He says, I want to go in. I said, Del, I just pulled a half an hour into this stupid wind, got us to this spot. You said you'd stay out, He goes, I want to go home. He reeled in. I said, okay, God damn it. I was cussing like Blue Streak. Everything in the book. And then we got in the car on the way home, and I had decided I couldn't do it anymore with him. He didn't have that same passion for it anymore. I was crying, actually, because I spent more, for 22 years, I spent more daylight hours with Del Brown than I did with my wife. We fish 8 or 10 hours a day, 55 days a year. We're like, bonded, I mean, I knew everything about him, stuff I shouldn't know, and he knew everything about me, So you get really close. A skiff is a small place, and it gets very intimate a lot of the times, the conversation. So I was crying. I said, Del, I just can't fish anymore. I said, it's driving me crazy, because I want to catch these fish. And so I broke down crying, but I told him that was it. So he started fishing with Dustin after that. But it was only a couple of years before he passed away. So, but yeah. So I still struggle with that. I'm fishing. A
couple of your anglers now probably of age.
That are older, and it's, what do you think about it? Bullshit. So I haven't learned a lot, but I just like being there, man. I like being floating and trying to figure stuff out. And
so you made that transition when it got crowded and you didn't want to commute with the traffic. And
right. So now I live in Everglades City. I launch at my friend Ted Jurisick's house. I got a 3-minute drive out there,
Was this overwhelming when you first got here? I mean, you look at all these thousands and thousands of islands and tannic water, and
that's why I love it.
Oyster bars.
Because you can always learn something. That's my favorite thing about this country, is there's not enough lifetimes to figure this place out. I mean, if you take I primarily am fishing. I catch redfish here and there, but I'm primarily fishing for snook and tarpon, and to try to if anybody says they know the Everglades, they're full of crap. Nobody can know the Everglades in a lifetime, you know. I mean, I run around there and I'm running by millions of fish all the time. I know it. I just don't know where they're going to be, where you can catch them, or, you know.
Did you start guiding right away, or did you take some time off to know the water? And
Here?
Yes.
No, I had been coming over here. I started bringing my sons over here when they were 10 and 12. Dustin and Chad started, our summer vacation was here. We come over here for 2 weeks, fish daylight till dark.
Oh, so you were familiar with it.
Yeah, so and I'd done that for a number of years, and then I really enjoyed fishing over here, so I started bringing customers over here way back then too, you know. And I'd tell them, I said, you know, I'm still trying to figure this out. The first time I came over here, I was fishing in the Keys. We were permit fishing off Key West, and I had a guy, he said, you ever catch any snook on a fly? I said, I think I'd caught a couple around Flamingo, you know. But it was a time when the snook population had taken a dive. He said, you want to catch a snook on a fly, you got to go to the West Coast. I'll find out some names of some people over there. He said, no, I want to go with you. You know about fly fishing. I said, I don't know shit. I need a road map to find Everglades City, you know. And I did. And we drove over here and just went out. We caught a bunch of little tiny things. And but I thought, I like the country. I like the challenge of trying to figure it out. And
That's always been valuable to you.
So complex, you know, the hydrology, how the water moves through the islands, which is really tells you where the fish are, you know, little back eddies, little edges, little, you know, how the water hits the shoreline. It has a lot to do with why fish get there, you know, stuff like that. So, and you get it twice a day because when the tide changes, it goes the other direction. You got to figure out the faller too, you know. So it's kind of fun.
It's complicated.
Yeah, I like to think it is, but
it is.
Yeah, I dig it.
You were. It's been since November 1st, 1968, 51 years of guiding.
Right.
You said you're going to retire at 70. How's that retirement working out for you?
I still most of the people that I have fished for many, many years, you know. Bill Hassett, I have fished for 49 years. That's a long time to fish with somebody. Lenny Berg, probably 40 years, you know.
But you're no longer guiding. You fish.
I'm guiding. I take people out. They want to catch a fish. They're hire me to go catch a fish. Yeah.
So you're still doing
but it's just bit. Yeah, a little bit. Just the people that
you want to hang with.
I get to choose. You know, I fish some really super guys from North Carolina. I've only fished them maybe a dozen years, but it doesn't sounds like a long time. But if you fish for 50, it's not. But they're in it for the right reasons. They love the fish. We tarpon fish, but
what is it about snook that gets your blood going?
They're totally honest fish, and they're just balls ass exciting. You know, the bigger they are, the more exciting they are. But generally, you know, you get a fly in front of them, they just crush it. You know, they don't swim over and sip it. They just blow it up. You know, and they haul ass and they jump and they fight and they're beautiful creatures. They look like a Corvette, you know. They're just like a missile. And they're very stealthy. They don't give themselves away.
Smart.
You know, I mean, bonefish will mud, bonefish will tail, permit do the same, tarpon come up and roll, and snook you can be in a place where there's like a million snook. And if they're not feeding or busting something, it's like, oh shit, we just spooked another one. God damn it, we can't. You know, it's like they're just creeping around. You're creeping around. If they were Puerto Ricans, they'd stab you to death in 3 seconds. You know?
I think you related them to pickpocketers.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're just But so it's really I like where they live. I like, you know, they cruise very slowly. They're explosive strikers like a cuda. You know, they just lay in wait for something, you know, and you see them just sitting there. Sometimes it just looks like a little dark streak or a little gray streak on the bottom, you know, and could that be one? I was with Chico one time over here. Chico Fernandez, we were bowling along, and on the conversation out riding, you know, Chico, we ought to cast. If it looks like a fish, if it's worth talking about, cast to it, right? Yeah, you're right, because these stupid things, they look like a stick laying on the bottom. So we're riding out, and we're pulling around, and there's a big clunk of moss that had kind of rolled up on them. It looked like a stick next to it or something. He says, I think that's a snook. I said, nah, don't worry about it. Oh, yeah. But we're both kind of glancing over our shoulder. Wait a minute, didn't we just have this conversation? You know, so I pulled back like 50 yards, get He's still the stick as he throws it over. It's like an 18-pound snook.
Oh my God!
Catches the thing. So, yeah. So I think they're just a really great target species. You know,
they're here prevalently.
Yeah, I mean, you get certainly not every day, but if you take a guy fly fishing, just fly fishing, you'll catch
A couple of little ones.
30 of these. That were 15, 18 inches long, and maybe a couple of fish that are 30 inches long, which 30-inch snook is a nice fish. That's getting to be like 9 or 10 pounds,
Let's go back to Key West in the movie Tarpon, which is one of the really great movies of all time, and documenting tarpon, and let's just talk briefly about that group of characters. You had Jimmy Buffett, Bronigan. Jimmy Harrison.
Yeah.
Jim Harrison.
Tom McGuane.
I mean,
Guy Valden.
Yeah, these guys they eventually became very, very, very successful as
it's amazing.
As you did. Tell me about that era.
Well, I tell you, I wasn't part of that group. That was like...
You just got caught in the movie.
I got caught in the movie, really, because Guy Valden, who actually funded that whole movie, was very close friends with Woody Sexton, who was a guide at the time. Woody Sexton was a partner of Stu Apps in the 50s, tarpon guiding down there. And I become really good friends with Woody. And a character of just a ridiculously great guy, but a nutcase, but a wonderful person. And so he said they're going to make this movie and they want to do a film. And in that movie, there's also a guy by the name of Ray Donisberger, who was a legendary angler at the time. He fished with Stu a lot. He was probably Stu's favorite angler. He was an unbelievable caster in his day, He was a businessman from Chicago, but a great guy. Page Brown is in that movie. He owned a marina there on Big Pine. He was a successful businessman from up north. And who else? But so those guys were like straight. The rest of these guys were nutcases. I mean, they were just
out of it,
chasing women and whatever kind of chemicals was just fine with them. They were whacked out guys, but they were great guys,
right.
And they just worshipped the tarpon, which is pretty evident in that movie,
Right.
But
it's crazy to see how they were all writers, and they all, McGuane and Harrison, Bronigan.
Yeah.
And they were really successful.
Of course.
I
mean, that one little group
yes.
out of that movie, and then these other knuckleheads like myself, they asked me to be in this thing. Well, Woody got me in there. Woody said, would you be interested in, we're just going to sit around and talk about tarpon. I said, hell yeah, I don't care, So they had some dinner there. We were in Ray Donisberger's house, and just bullshitting about tarpon. He said, all you got to do is bullshit about tarpon. So I said, sure, I'm in.
I can do that.
Gil Drake was the guide. There were two people polling in that in that movie. One was Gil Drake, who also lives over here now. And he's a snook nut and an unbelievably good fisherman. He lived in Key West for years and years. And the other person was Woody, that was polling around with in that movie some too. So, yeah. But I was just a kind of a bystander. Bring in the bullshitter.
Well, after all these years, you were inducted into the IGFA Fishing Hall of Fame. I mean, how great was that for you?
Oh, it's kind of a neat thing, I mean, some guys that I'd fished for many years thought it would be a fun thing to try to get me into that. And, I don't understand it all, but I just, people want to, I guess people feel like they have some debt of gratitude for all the good times we've had or something. I don't know.
Well, obviously.
I think I'm a good fisherman, but right now, today, when I started guiding, it was different. There were a lot of people that were in guiding because there's no other way to make a living in the Keys. A lot of them were retired from working on the railroad, stuff like that, But I had like this passion to fish. I guarantee you Jimmy Albright didn't wind up in the Keys and say, I want to be a fishing guide. I'm going to go down there and guide. He was down there doing something else, and then tourists were coming down, wanted to get in a boat and go tug on something, and then he took them out,
Right.
But and I think that's probably the case with most guides. But today, and I might have been the starting point of that, but today, I would say, I bet you over 50% of the guides down there have college educations. And they're just total fish heads.
Mm-hmm.
They just, all they want to do, they can't imagine themselves doing anything. They could probably make $1 bazillion on Wall Street, But that's not important. And all the money in the world can't buy you the experiences that they're going to have and I've had. You couldn't pay for it. There's no money in the world. And to see the things like we're talking about Homosassa, that'll never be seen again. Nobody's ever going to see that again. So,
right. What kind of advice would you give to somebody that wants to be a guide and has the same dreams that you once had when you were young?
Go for it. Life's too short not to do what you want to do, Don't expect to get rich. Don't expect to get rich, but, I'd tell people to pursue it. I mean, I wouldn't trade with anyone. I'm the luckiest guy I know, really. I've done what I wanted to do. I've got a great family. I got 2 sons that are fishing guides, and they're nuts. One of them was an electrical engineer since he got out of school, and like 2 or 3 years ago said, Dad, I said, I'm tired of sitting behind a computer. I got to be out there. And I said, hell yeah, do it. Go for it, So he's not looking back. He's just excited as shit to get in that boat every day. I mean, literally, after all these years, I get in that boat in the morning, pointed across the bay, and I own my day. There's no waiting in line anywhere. There's no, I go where I want to go, when I want to go. I'm kind of the boss or the captain. So, I mean, if I want to run 20 miles, I'm going to say, and there's a rainstorm, I said, put your suit on. We're going right through that sucker. But I just get out there and it's an incredible release when you hit the throttle on your boat and you go, I can deal with the broken toilet when I get home, and all the crap that you leave behind, and you disconnect, and all your focus is just, let's go catch. What are we going to catch and how we're going to catch it? And, what the wind and tide and cloud cover and all this crap is going into the computer, and people say, where are we at? I have no idea. I'm just going to drive around to something that looks like I should pull in, and try it. So
I think you used the term, you're free.
It is. It's a total release. You're free. And that is it. And I've always said that. My favorite time of the day is when I hit the throttle and the wind hits me in the face and I go, yes.
Was that like your bike when you were 10 years old? Was your bike your sense of freedom?
Oh, absolutely, man. I lived on my bicycle. As soon as I learned how to ride it, I crashed like 1,000,000 times. As soon as I had no skin on my knees or elbows, but as soon as I learned how to ride that thing, man, I was gone.
After all these years and all the great success and experiences that you've had, you've got a great family. If you had a chance to speak with your father one more time, what would you say?
I never even thought about it, Just say too bad,
Yeah.
Too bad. I feel sorry for him.
Yeah.
I would have been a nice guy to know.
For sure.
As a son, I think.
Yeah.
I can tell you that because I have 2 sons, and I worship both of them. And if I talk about it very much, I'll cry. But I think they're great fishermen, but they're better people. And to me, that's really the most important thing. It's not. They have very high ethics and high standards for themselves, and they expect everybody else to be the same way. And, I tell them every day, if you treat people like you like to get treated yourself, you can't go wrong. So, and they've lived by that, So they do. They treat people very well, but you don't want to be around and treat them badly. You're going to find out about it.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. Well, speaking on behalf of not only Nikki and I in the fishing world, we love you.
Well, I appreciate that, man.
You've given us a lot.
I'm just an old guy that likes to fish. I'm not quitting yet.
Well, thank you for
thanks, Steve,
for hanging with us.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bud.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nikki. Good.